Well, hello there, and after a fraught house move, we're back for a look at the sky in December 2021, where winter beckons. Now then, customary look at the Sun, of course. We've got some active regions on the Sun. This grouping up here, 2902, and then a couple of little groupings going around the edge there. We look at the stats, and we find that things have very much changed since a year ago. So far in 2021 there have been 60 spotless days in a current stretch of no days at all, compared to 208 days, i.e. 57% of all days last year, and the current total is 18% of the days of 2021 so far, with only another 30 days to go. So this is the update as of the 2nd of December, and if we look back at the history of this, we're sort of somewhere close to where we were in 2010, where there were 14% of all days were spotless, and that's exactly as you'd expect, that the solar cycle being 11 years long approximately. Let's have a look at that cycle. Now this is the last cycle, cycle 24 here, which was a much reduced cycle in intensity compared to its predecessors 23, 22 and 21, going back to the 1980s. Now, predictions for cycle 25, our current cycle that's just getting well started now, was that it would be pretty much like 24, i.e. not terribly intense. But actually there seems to be a bit of a rethink on this. This was the prediction made by NOAA, NASA and the ISES, saying similar to 24. However, more recently they've looked at this again and sort of found that, well, it could be more than that. Macintosh et al. 2020 are sort of predicting a range actually greater than solar cycle 23, a bit more like 22 even, and certainly much more intense than 24. And actually, when we look at how things have kicked off at the beginning of the cycle, it does seem to be, in terms of auroral activity and so on, that we are somewhat ahead of where we were just 11 years ago. This is just a comparison I made of some aurora shots. Now this is October 2012, the start of cycle 24. These are all taken from the same place roughly in Ballygally, County Antrim. And that there is what we call a bit of a ground hugger. It's green, all right, and you can see a teeny bit of structure in it, but there's not much structure there. But compared to less than 4 years later, when the cycle peaked around 2016, much higher rays, much brighter colours, much more structure. Now, I have to admit that this was taken, the 2016 one was taken with a somewhat better camera than the 2012 version, and that goes as well for the one I'm about to show you here. This is Ballygally, the 4th of November 2021. Now that was 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's the first capture I've actually got in solar cycle 25 of the aurora, with a fair bit of structure in it, some green and some red. I should add the caveat that it doesn't really look quite like that. I was getting a sort of a white fog with my eyes for the red, because my eyes don't do 10-second exposures as my camera does. But I was getting a little tinge of green in these gaps in the clouds over here. So I think it is coming along a little bit more than we sort of might expect, just based on a repetition of cycle 24. So I think the quite possible that 25 will be a little better than 24 at least. Now then, the planets in December. We have, we'll do a bit more of this later, but Jupiter is past opposition, but very visible, good and bright, still about -1.5 magnitude, quite low, about 20 degrees up after sunset. And likewise to its right you'll find Saturn, even a bit lower, but still reasonable in a scope actually. I've seen the rings, and the rings they're beginning to close up a little bit, as they will between now and 2025. But Saturn is looking quite nice in a scope. Mars, not easily visible this month, is actually behind the Sun, so that's the one that you won't see. Venus is very low, but very, very bright. It's actually peaking its magnitude on the 7th of December at -4.7. That's as bright as it ever gets. It's a lovely crescent phase. You can even see that in binoculars. 1 or 2 people I know can actually see the crescent phase naked eye. It is just at the threshold of naked eye vision to see a shape in it. And Mercury is actually at the end of the month, right at the end of the month. You can probably see Mercury down low with Venus at the end of the month. There. Uranus and Neptune you can see all month in the evening. Uranus is up in Aries, just below Hamal and Sheraton, magnitude 5.8. So some say just about naked eye visible. I never have seen it like that myself, but quite easy in binoculars, and a small telescope even will show it as a small green blob. Likewise, Neptune. Neptune is not naked eye visible. It's too dim for that, magnitude 7.8. But it is visible in Aquarius, and you can sort of find it below the head of Pisces, and the starting point for that would probably be the Great Square of Pegasus, where the head of Pisces is below that, and a bit further down still. You'll need a star chart to find it exactly because it's not bright. Is Neptune in a telescope, small bluish blob. So that's Neptune. So it is a good month for seeing the planets. We'll just have one more look at that in a short while. Now then, there's a comet developing nicely here, and this is Comet Leonard C 2021 A1, and it is below. It's actually moved on a little bit from this now, but this was where it was a few days ago when I made this chart, and this was below the plough. So in fact now it's moved along into Bootes and past Messier 3 there, and down towards Alpha Bootes Arcturus, which you obviously find by following the handle of the plough down, and you arc round to Arcturus before spiking down to Spica, which is some way down there. Comet Leonard, well, we'll wait and see. Here's an image. I think this was taken around about the 30th of November by a gentleman called Darrell Spangler in Colorado, USA, obviously through a fairly substantial telescope. And it has that beautiful tail and the beautiful green cyanogen generated head there. So that's looking pretty good. Light curve. It's brightening up nicely, and this is the estimate, the orange line, and it does seem to be sticking pretty much to that. There were some rumours of its premature demise, but that seems to be not the case, and it's carrying on. So round about the middle of December, it should become naked eye even, getting maybe to magnitude 4, 3.5, something like that. Unfortunately for us, there's a bit of a bad news that actually as it gets brighter, it's also getting lower and lower and lower in the sky, so that as we're looking at this would be with the sort of the 5th, 6th of December, it'll come past Arcturus, and getting lower and lower and lower as it hopefully brightens. But actually we're at a latitude where it will be quite low on the horizon, and you'll need a good view to actually get good sight of it, and of course a very good sky. And so, well, we'll keep an eye on that one, but it's not quite a Neowise at the minute. Neowise from 2020, of course, was the last very good comet we had. I don't think Leonard is quite that good, and certainly not as well located in the sky. There are other comets, apart from 2021 A1 Leonard. 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko is back on the scene. Now then, we haven't seen that as a comet before, but that, of course, was the one that the Rosette mission went to and landed the Philae lander on about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And that's now coming into the vicinity of the Sun, magnitude 8.5, was seen towards the end of November. That's in the constellation Cancer, so you could get a reasonable view of it in the early evening, and well worth looking out for there. We'll perhaps keep a bit of an eye on that one. Now then, Geminid Meteor Shower. This unusually, most meteor showers are, of course, generated as we pass through the tail of a comet. This one is slightly different in that we pass through the debris tail of an asteroid, Phaeton 3200. And the radiant is up by Castor and Pollux. We'll be looking at Castor and Pollux a bit more closely later on. and the radiant is just above there. Don't look at the radiant, look about sort of 30 degrees or so around the radiant. I mean, looking in Orion would be a good place, or even down into Canis Major, or up in Taurus around the Pleiades, or Auriga near Capella. That's good there. The bad news is that there's a 9-day-old moon in the sky at the time, which will tend to drown out some of the less bright meteors on the night of the Monday the 13th of December and into the morning of Tuesday the 14th. The good news is that moon will go away just after 3 a.m. and indeed in any case looking after midnight is the best time to see meteors, as the Earth is facing into the debris trail of in this case the asteroid. So Belfast moonset is 0322 on the 14th. So if you fancy an early morning, that's probably the best time to see the Geminid meteor shower. And of course it all depends on the weather. Good news is it's a fairly broad shower, so actually a week or so either side you may well see Geminid meteors. Right, we're going to have a look at the deep sky now, and we're going to sort of focus on the area that, some have different names for this now. Some call this the winter triangle, based on Sirius, Procyon and Betelgeuse here. Some call it the winter hexagon, if you take Sirius, Procyon, Pollux, Capella, Aldebaran and Rigel as your 6 points of a hexagon. That's maybe works. On the other, some people call it now Big G. Big G is where you start at Betelgeuse, come down to Rigel, then go around to Sirius, Procyon, Pollux, Castor, Capella and round to Aldebaran. That's Big G. Whichever way you look at it, it is a very interesting piece of the sky, and we'll have a look at that now. Okay, so here we are looking towards the southeast, and it's set for, this is 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve, which seems a good time to be doing some observing. There's no particular moon in the sky, so we'll have a look at the south. And we've got this huge Big G area, and we'll start off, we see Sirius coming up. Now this is 9 o'clock. Sirius will rise up as time goes on. We'll just see how that happens. There, that's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and then the moon does come up a bit later, but that's there, and midnight into Christmas Day. So we'll come back to the beginning, and then we've got moving around the G. We've got Procyon, the twins, Pollux, and then Castor. Then moving up towards Capella, round to Aldebaran, Seven Sisters just up here. And then we come down to Orion. So let's focus on Orion first, and we'll focus on Alnitak in the middle of Orion. We have the 3 stars of the belt here, and then we have the colour contrasts there of Betelgeuse, which is these days about minus 0.45. It's returned to normality after its dimming period a couple of years ago. Rigel slightly brighter. There's not much in it. And maybe it wasn't always that case, because this is Beta Orionis, Rigel, even though it's now the brightest star. And of course, then we've got the sword, and the sword looks very good here, based on Messier 42 in the centre, and then we have the NGC above, which is the Running Man Nebula, and that looks all rather good there. And of course, we've got we have the Flame Nebula by Alnitak. And we zoom in closer, we go back to Alnitak here and zoom in closer, and we have not only the Flame Nebula but also famously the Horsehead just down from that. So a lot of hydrogen alpha type nebulosity in Orion, and some great sort of deep sky astrophotography targets there, well worth a look. Not far out from Orion in the direction of Procyon. From Betelgeuse there we have this nebula here, which is all very good. Now it's two aspects to it really. One is that centrally there's a star cluster, and the star cluster is quite easy to see in a small telescope, but you can actually also see around it, again you'll need a big Dobsonian to see this well, the Rosette Nebula, and it will show up very well on cameras that have been made more sensitive to red light. So there's the Rosette, that's well worth a look at. Moving over into Gemini, we have the twins Castor and Pollux, and then at the other end we have the stars Alhena and Mebsuta, And a little bit further from there we have Messier 35. So here's Messier 35, looking very good there. And that's one of a whole set of Messiers that run up right through that end of Gemini, right into Orion. We have Messier 37. Let's have a closer look at 37. Here we are. Again, that's a nice open cluster with some lovely structure to it. Looks great. Again, in even a fairly small scope will show that fairly well. You don't need a huge Dobsonian for that, but 6-inch scope, that'll look very fine. Likewise, then we move further up. We have Messier 36, similar sort of thing. Again, there's M36 in Orion, and 38 always looks a bit different to me. It's got a sort of a starfish type structure to it. Let's have a closer look at M38. I'm not sure if that's very apparent from this representation of it, but M38 always looks a bit like a sort of a starfish or a chromosome or something like that. There. So, and lots of other objects worth having a scan round Orion for. Let's see what else we can find in that region. Now, coming over into Taurus, we have, of course, Messier 45, the Seven Sisters. Now, of course, it's always a good test of eyesight that most people can see 6 or 7. I personally can see 6. But actually, once you start looking through a scope, you realise there's a couple of hundred stars in there. And really, the better your scope, the more you'll see. But that's M45. The Hyades cluster around Aldebaran. Aldebaran is not one of the Hyades, it just happens to be in the same direction. But all the others of these Hyades, they are a star cluster as well, so that's all worth looking out for. And there's a couple of things. When you see Sirius come up, below Sirius is a nice little open cluster, Messier 41. If we sort of advance the clock on a bit later, we'll be able to go and have a closer look at 41. Here's that's easily found from Sirius, and there we go. So that's some good deep sky objects to see in the big G area. You can see it all winter, and it's very good. So that's all I have to say about the deep sky. We'll just have a look at one more thing. So one more thing, let's just have a look at those planets again. We've set the time here for 5 p.m. early on the 31st of December, that's say New Year's Eve, just after the sun has gone down. So we're looking sort of to the southwest initially. Just after sunset, we can see a very low Mercury and Venus there. Venus through binoculars or a telescope will show a beautiful crescent phase. You probably won't get much of a phase on Mercury. Then look up a bit further, and a bit further south you'll see Saturn. With its rings being quite nicely on display, and that's still got a few years worth of that. Then we can come up to Jupiter. Jupiter will be very obvious, and you can note the position of the Galilean moons on Jupiter. Then we can go a little bit further over into Aquarius, and you'll be able to find beneath the Great Square of Pegasus and the head of the fish, there's Neptune. And then a bit further up still by Aries, just below Sheraton and Hamal, before you get to the Seven Sisters, which are just a bit further up there, you can see Uranus. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and of course the Earth is 7 planets on New Year's Eve, so look out for that. So that's all I have to say on that. So stay safe, keep looking up, thanks for watching, and of course a very Merry Christmas.